that changes the possibilities of stalls that are even available to certain people. And again, there's also a wide array of opinions that vendors have based on what spots are lucrative, what spots they prefer. I feel like no one really agrees on what the best stalls are in the market because it is very different based on the product, the person, where people's customers are used to finding them is a big part of it. So that's how we've been doing it. One small caveat there is that there are some people, if they come every week, we just have them permanently signed in. Like we know they're coming, they're always there, and they just call us and say if they're not coming. So for people that are not as tech savvy, for people that are more regulars, that is something we do. We also allow them to call us, and we also allow them to inform us the market previous to the day that they will be attending, that they will be there. So there's a bunch of different ways that people can sign in. So don't worry, it isn't just email based, Google documents based. We do have a host of different examples. For instance, Jeff, he's just a permanent signed in. We know he's going to be there every market, and we just go with that, put him in his permanent stalls, move on. Right? He has parking spots that are unfortunately being taken up by the pod. That is part of the renovation project, but we give him other stalls because of that. So that's the other thing I should say, is that it's not just stalls where people's product is, there's also parking spots assigned. So how that works again is that annual vendors, our most senior annual vendors have assigned stalls, like they're parking in a specific spot every week. That is their spot. They quote unquote own that spot, just like they do their stall. And then around that, we cannot guarantee parking for everybody because we just unfortunately don't have enough space in the market lot. So how that works again is based on seniority. So as we go down the list, the people closer to the bottom of the daily list have less of a chance of parking in the lot than do those that are more senior. So with that said, everything we're doing is still based off of the traditional seniority system. We've just changed the methodology of when we assign the stalls. So that's sort of my large overview. So, the 6 a.m. thing has ceased to exist at that time frame. This is something that we're doing the day before. And I send out a physical copy of the map via email on the evening of the market before. So I try to do it between 3 and 4 p.m. On either the Tuesday night or the Friday night previous to market. But again, some people already know what their stall is. They don't even need to check the map because they're assigned, or we talked about it in advance. So that's how that works. So hopefully that makes sense. And maybe I'll let there be questions before I go down the list on how this would change this full policy. So are there any questions, comments about that? How we changed it?
Let me just make sure I understand.
Sure. Yep.
Stephanie.
Please.
So obviously what's in writing was what was in existence. The email beforehand and the sign up by noon the day prior is the new way that you're doing this for
Correct.
COVID.
Correct.
And so what we're talking about today is making that change permanent.
Correct.
Okay. And Carly, so I got a little confused because Carlene's comment was about these rules evolving over many years. And yes, this is a COVID specific change that we're talking about, but she was referencing the old rules that they came into being over many years of practice and input. And so it sounds like she's suggesting that we go through a longer, careful process of getting input again before making the changes permanent. Is that right?
That's what she was suggesting. The reason that I think it's important is I've gotten quite a lot of feedback directly from vendors already in favor of the new change. I've heard from very, very few people that want to go back to what it was before. Maybe 2 people total, but I've heard at least from 17 specific vendors that have said, please don't go back. We appreciate this. We feel much more relaxed. We like knowing where we are before we arrive, things like that. Although again, there's some people that prefer the old way, liked it better. But you know, a lot of those people, they aren't necessarily impacted by this change directly themselves because they are people with assigned stalls. So I don't know if that helps to clarify. But the reason that we want to make this permanent is we've noticed that it works very well. And of course, it's an imperfect system, given that there are sometimes cancellations, right? That happens. That's normal. That would happen on a normal day if an annual just doesn't show up. But the way that it worked before was, and again, I was not there, but from what I have heard from vendors, it was very chaotic. They felt like it was a much higher level of tension in the morning. There was conflicts erupting over, you know, people wanting the same stall. Whereas in this process, that kind of gets smoothed over in advance. And people feel like it's a little bit more consistent where they can be. And again, we're still going by seniority. That has not changed. But due to COVID, we are being a little bit more flexible if there's a miscommunication, right? If someone didn't sign in on the correct form, or if somebody forgot to call us by the 12 p.m. You know, cutoff, we have been flexible because of the pandemic and it's a new process. So I think that might have led to some confusion from some folks that might not be that much in favor of this new way. At least that's my understanding. I could be wrong, but that's just what I have been told by people. But does that help clarify a little bit, Holly?
I wonder, Jeff, can you talk a little bit about anything you've heard, both positive and negative? Can I put you on the spot?
Put me on the spot.
Nature's beast.
So, I guess one of the biggest issues is, I don't know if you guys remember, but we did talk about doing this. Maybe it was right after I came to the commission, so it was probably a year and a half ago. There was kind of a push to change the rules then to the current COVID system. So
Oh, really?
only,
I didn't know that.
I don't know if it was because it had been talked about that this is how we're going to do it, or if it was ushered in under the umbrella of COVID, if you know what I mean. Personally, to me, it doesn't affect me. I get to market early. It hasn't affected me at all personally. One of my biggest concerns about the rule change then, I could see where it could be an issue now, is it kind of a bottleneck. Before, things kind of happened in stages. You had the people with annual stalls would get there and they had to be there by 6 o'clock. And then they would have their trucks unloaded usually by 6:30. And then by 6:30, you'd have those trucks getting out of the way. And then you'd have the daily people would come in and they'd start setting up. So it was more of a transitional, it spread things out more. Whereas now, you might have somebody who's used to getting there at 6 o'clock because they're an annual vendor. And when they get there, the daily vendor that is set up behind them or next to them might have their truck backed in already. That's all I'm really hearing about it is issues like that. So I guess I don't know if that, personally to me, it's not affecting me at all, to be honest with you. So it's hard for me to try to, see everything and that's pretty much the gist of it, though, is I think that's the part of the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from that, I haven't heard much input on it. I do think it's something that everyone should have a say in, as far as it's kind of a big decision to make. Yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, and I mean, that makes sense. And that's something that we could potentially talk about, is like having a different arrival time for annuals and dailies. Like, we don't have to get rid of that part. But I don't necessarily see us going back to the walkout process, just realistically. But I completely agree with you that folks need some feedback to be put into the process. Lisa, I saw that you had unmuted.
Yeah, so Stephanie, I think there's a lot of positive things about these changes, but we are hearing that vendors in particular want an opportunity to comment. So what I was wondering is if you can write up the new process, what you envision putting in the rules, so that the vendors could take a look at it, and then we can take a look at it for next meeting, and then think about if this sounds like a good thing to adopt, to move forward on the adoption. But probably having something in writing about the actual process, and how it would work and how it would go into the rules, and giving everybody an opportunity to comment on it would especially the vendors, would probably be a good thing, a good process to go through.
Sure. And just the other side of it is that we've already made these changes. So I worry that if we do yet a third thing, it would make things very confusing. I think it makes the most sense to sort of tweak what we currently have to something that works for everybody. And what I can do is, like, in the sign-in sheet, we already have language written up clearly explaining to people, when they need to sign in by, when they need to arrive by. So this is all language that has already been shared with the vendors, but I can certainly write something up for next meeting that could be sort of the draft. Because again, this is just a preliminary conversation that I wanted to put past people, because again, it doesn't go just through us. This is something that needs to be approved by council as well, since it is something that is a specific rule change. It's not just, we say we're going to do it and it's done. Like, there is a very formal process to go through this. So I just wanted to clarify and assuage any concerns that this is literally just our first conversation about this. But the reason we're having it is because this is a program that we're already doing. And we just needed to make sure that everybody's on the same page moving forward. But I completely appreciate all comments, and I will write that down, that you want to see something in writing for next meeting.
I didn't mean to interrupt, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, as from a daily vendor perspective.
I didn't even know you were here, Helen.
Yeah,
so.
Boo! Sorry, I was late.
No, okay. Go ahead.
This is something that before COVID happened, I was hoping to have a change like this, because setting up in the morning as a daily vendor is really challenging. You get there, and that bottleneck that Jeff's talking about is something that happened every Saturday, all the time, for daily vendors. So maybe there's something else to add to prevent bottlenecking now that everybody's able to get there whenever they want or something. But I can't remember all the people I talked to, but I had previously talked to other daily vendors that were in favor of some kind of change like this. So I'm just throwing my vote towards it. Yeah.
I appreciate your comments, Helen, and I agree. What I've observed recently is the folks that are making the bottlenecks are actual annual vendors that take up way too much space that we've talked to directly, and it's not so much daily folks getting there too early from what I have observed when I'm walking around the market in the morning. But I completely hear what everyone is saying. We want to make sure it works for all, and that we're not unfairly disadvantaging one group of people. That's certainly not our goal, nor should it be. So that's the other thing I think we need to be aware of. And I very much appreciate your comments, Helen, because it echoes what many, many, many people have told me. Lots of people. And this is people coming up to me, completely unrelated conversations, right? I'm not even asking people about this. And they've come up to me and said, oh my goodness, thank you so much. I feel so much better. I have more time. Because that's the other thing, is like, when you're making somebody have 30 minutes before market starts to set up, especially people with 2 stalls, I mean, that's really not fair, the way that I look at it, because it puts a burden on them. So even if we said, theoretically, you're a daily, you can't get there until this time, that's a problem. So I think this is part of a broader conversation that we need to have about timing. And then also just to remind people, if you're just unloading your vehicle and it's blocking everyone's parking spots, be more community oriented, I'll say. But I agree. I think that's part of a broader conversation that goes beyond just this rule change, and is more just reminding folks that we are all in this together, and all of our successes are linked inextricably to each other, and we shouldn't be working at cross purposes. So, thanks. I will get off my soapbox now. But again, I wasn't there before. I only know this system. But from what I have seen, there's been a lot of positive feedback. Holly, so you've unmuted.
Yeah, thank you. So that's all really helpful. And I think Lisa's right that it is probably, from our perspective, good to have it written down and then offer opportunity for comments. Sounds like from what Carlene said, I mean, Carlene's caution makes me think that there's, at least, as you said, at least one or two that have some concerns, and we want to make sure that we hear them too. So, but it's really the context and the experience, the personal experience here is really helpful to hear. So thank you.
Yeah, let me see too if I can just send you all sort of like the verbiage that I send out to vendors about sort of the sign-in process. Maybe just I'll give you an example, just of sort of like our electronic sign-in. I don't know if that would be really helpful for a visual or not. Guess I'll just put it into the chat if I can, although I don't know. I probably can't do it that way. Sorry, not this type of webinar Zoom. That's the other type of Zoom. False alarm, but I will send it to you via email. How about that? And I will definitely have something written for next time.
Yeah, Stephanie, I appreciate all that. It's sort of, since we're the people who have to see the rules, what's the change in wording that you would propose with this new system that would actually go into the rules? And then I think that will probably, anybody who's hesitant about the changes, to have it in writing and have a process of commenting on it. It's just all that transparency that I think it sounds like many people are happy, but having that transparency of actually what the process is, because it's in the language for the rules, will help alleviate a lot of that hesitancy.
Sure, and that's my goal, and that's why we're having this conversation, because I was very apprehensive every time a new person would want to apply to market before we put a pause, and I'm like, here I am sending these rules to these people, having to say, oh, just disregard that part for right now, and then having to have a separate orientation where I explained how we were doing things currently. So yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think we need to move in that direction with as many people's input as want to give it.
I just have one final question about the bottleneck is, since I've been to market for a little while, it's still COVID spacing, right? Where there's space between the stalls. And when that changes, do you anticipate that bottleneck issue to be getting worse? Or if everybody's comfortable with the rules and you implement a sort of more a time frame, I'm just asking if that bottleneck problem could get potentially worse with more stall crowding.
Truthfully, we're pretty much too full right now to have spacing everywhere. We can do it on Wednesday pretty easily, but on Saturdays, given where annual stalls are, the fact that there are multiple people whose assigned stalls are next to each other, and that's just their chosen stalls, and there's not much we can do right now, given that the last 2 Saturdays we've been at around 75 vendors already in May, and our threshold for fitting everyone under the roof with spacing is about 60. So I think it's not really going to get worse. I think we're sort of at the hardest time of year, really, because it's when people have extra trucks for plants, which when some of our larger farms are coming with extra product. So I do think right now we sort of are navigating the most difficult time for that. At least that's my viewpoint on it. I don't know if Helen or Jeff have any other things to add on that.
Stephanie, any plans to change the mask rule at the market, given that rule's changed, statewide?
Yeah, great question. And that was we'll move on to the second part of the other pandemic related parts of this bullet point, and we could circle back if we need to. Yeah, so we were sort of caught off guard a little bit by the change because it was so abrupt last week. You know, it was Friday. We had to figure it out by Saturday. And of course, neither the city nor the Michigan Farmers Market Association had any recommendations for it quickly. So we have been keeping everything the same. And the reason we came to this conclusion is partly MIFMA did release their new recommendations this week. And they said, you know, in spaces where you cannot physically distance, like us on the crowded market on Saturdays, it's a good idea to keep everything in place, at least until, you know, another update. And the city is sort of on that same page as us because we can't physically distance on Saturdays. And, you know, we have no interest in getting into a conversation with people about whether or not they are vaccinated. We just would rather just everyone have a mask requirement, so we don't have to put staff in harm's way in getting them in those conversations. And again, you know, there was another announcement made today saying that, you know, June 1st, some of the other, you know, group numbers would be changing. So we are adapting, you know, as we get new information, but for the current moment, nothing is changing. We still have our mask signs up. We still have our hand washing stations. We still have our sanitizing stations. We still are trying to space as much as possible. We still have one-way traffic. We're still doing tokens out of the office window. But I've definitely seen over the last two markets, so Saturday and this Wednesday, definitely a lot less people thinking that masks are required. So we do have our work cut out for us with that, but at least right now we have documentation that we can share with people to say, you know, this is the recommendations we are following, this is why we are following it. But, you know, we are adapting as quickly as we can to all the changes. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Tough spot to be in.
Yes. Looking forward to when everything is safe enough for us to not have to do this stuff. But until that is here, we will be continuing everything to keep folks safe. And the good news is, you know, many of our vendors and all of market staff are fully vaccinated. So, you know, we are getting to herd immunity, at least at the market, if not statewide. So that's also something that I think has made people feel a little bit more comfortable. But we have gotten a lot of feedback from customers since the mask change was made that, you know, asking us to please keep it, that they feel more comfortable in mask spaces. Because again, you know, they're not sure if people that really, you know, are vaccinated are the ones not wearing masks. You know, like, there's too much of a gray area for some people. And we also want to respect the wishes of our customers as well in terms of their safety. So
Else on that?
cool. Does anyone else have any questions or comments about how we're changing things or not changing things? Because really the only rule change I'm looking to change is the sign-in process only. You know, that's it. We're not looking to change anything else. You know, I looked through all the rules very closely and, you know, I could see nothing else that really needed a change. And in this case, yeah, it might not have been something that like I had planned on because again, I came into market with this already in place. You know, it wasn't my idea. I didn't come up with it, but it has seemed to be working. And most customers and vendors have been very, very good about following all of our safety directions. There's of course an occasional person here and there that gives us a problem. And there have been many instances where we talk to people and they just end up leaving. We obviously try not to have that happen. We try to just, you know, offer them a mask and smooth over the situation. But that's not always possible. So yeah, it's been a time, but we do have some extra help now. We do have a new intern that started about a week and a half ago. She's been helping us, and we do have some volunteers now coming back, which we couldn't have last year. So I guess that is a change due to COVID. So before we weren't allowing interns and volunteers. Now that they have come back, So that's a really good thing. We're still doing curbside for the foreseeable future. Not very many people utilize it. Right now, it's mostly Frog Holler and their seedling distribution, that they're kind of running their own whole curbside booth just because they have so many orders. But we are still offering it for people that need it, so that we have that option available for people that can't medically tolerate a mask or just don't feel comfortable shopping yet in public. So that's something we still have going, that we're trying to tell people about it as much as possible. But I think it's really just people want that community experience. They want to physically be at the market. So I think that's the reason why that has dropped off sort of in popularity since we've been back. And I think that's really all in terms of the pandemic related stuff. Does anyone have any last questions, comments, concerns about any of that? All right, I'll take that as a no. Cool. Well, then we will move on to the next agenda item, which is a thank you and farewell to Helen and a welcome back to Jeff. So thank you, Helen. I wanted to thank you. I know that you didn't really get a full term because you were like in the pandemic and you got so much going on in your own personal life. So I just wanted to thank you so much for putting the time in and bearing with us virtually, because that was, I feel like, the bulk of your term wasn't even in person. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Been good I wish I could have done more. And us. Is there somebody that do you know who's replacing me?
I have heard that the mayor approved Stephanie Willett to take your place as a daily vendor. So.
She'll do a great job. That's great.
Yeah,
all right.
There were a couple other people that applied, but I had no role whatsoever in doing the decision making. That was all the mayor's office. But I think, yeah, a new daily vendor that's also produce, I think, is a really good sort of fill in for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. It's a good opportunity.
You're welcome. And, if in a couple years you're ready to come back, the door's open. So
thanks.
Helen, we expect to see that baby at the market sometime.
Uh-oh. Got outed publicly.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to do it.
I might get to take Ann Arbor back over, so that would be nice. Get to come home to my home market.
Tell the Northern Flame, the flame of the North, that it was not me that told people.
Okay. It was in her newsletter this week.
Okay. I was worried. I was like, thanks. I didn't tell a soul. Congratulations, though.
Yeah,
congratulations, Helen.
So speaking of which, I got a question. As far as the meetings go, when are we going to be able to start having them in person again?
Great question. I was wondering the same thing. City Hall, as of right now, is still closed. So I would imagine that once City Hall opens back up, we will start going back to in-person meetings.
Okay.
So if not June, then probably July, if the mask mandate's going to be gone and stuff like that. But I do not know definitively, but I will update you.
Okay.
So Stephanie, do you know if there will be a sort of phone-in option? Because I'm thinking about how far Helen had to drive and Jeff had to drive. Do you think there'd be an ability to have hybrid meetings?
I'm not sure, because the reason that we were able to have this is the governor made a special order that this would be possible. So I'm not sure if that's something that will continue. I know the city itself, they are exploring options for people to continue teleworking where it is reasonable and for jobs that makes sense for. But I know that they're also constrained by the Public Meetings Act at the state level. So that is something that hopefully I'll have information about once we know when we're transitioning.
So I guess Jeff and Helen, if that was an option for you, in person or calling in, would that be something you'd be interested in?
I prefer the in-person personally, but I'm
You,
kind of old-fashioned like that.
even though it's a long drive, I also prefer in person. I just feel like I get better connection and information that way. Although I would probably take advantage of calling in sometimes under like circumstances, but yeah, even with the drive, I prefer in person.
Mhm.
Great, thanks.
Cool.
Did
Great.
you was there something else we were going to discuss on the COVID related stuff, or?
There wasn't, unless you had something you wanted to bring up that I
No,
missed.
I can talk to you about it. It's nothing that we need to discuss at the meeting. I earlier when I asked you about the.
Oh yeah, about the sidewalk. Oh yeah, thanks. I know that previously what I was told was that like the cages and stuff were there to block entrance of people, so it would be a little bit more of a controlled space. Um, so as long as we have some walkway usable, I think that's okay. Um, because I think, yeah, you know, there's multiple vendors that are in the same boat that kind of like use the area behind the stalls as for storage and for backstock. So I think maybe we can, you know, on Saturday, let's look at the space and
Sure.
let's see, you know, how much spaces really makes sense so that we can still maintain a walkway there.
Sure. Okay. Sounds good.
Great. Appreciate it. Cool. And I forgot to put this in, so maybe I can just put it under new business. I forgot that I got an update. Well, I didn't forget because I didn't have this information when I made this agenda. I got an update about the bathroom renovation project yesterday. Maintenance staff came to market because for those of you that have been following along, it's taking a little longer than we had been told to do the full renovation of the bathrooms, which means that right now we don't have operational bathrooms other than portable toilets at the market. We do have sinks with running water, however, and we do have access to the, you know, full service bathrooms inside of Carytown once they open for the day. But maintenance staff was out on Wednesday, so I guess that was yesterday, trying to assess, you know, what's taking so long, what are the snags in the process, and they are trying to figure out, you know, how they can expedite that, and whether that means, you know, just focusing on finishing one bathroom as quickly as possible so that we can at least have one for people, or exploring other options. Because I guess, you know, the contractor that they had been working with, the timeline, you know, got very far behind, and they were not very happy with the quality of the work that has been going on due to that and the, you know, quickness of that project. So we hope that this week they'll be able to get some very definitive information and we'll have an updated timeline, because, you know, it's getting to be a problem that we don't have bathrooms for vendors that are accessible, especially for folks. Some of our vendors do have mobility issues, and it is an extreme hardship for them to have to walk to across the parking lot or upstairs, you know, when they have stalls that are relatively close to where we would have facilities. It's also a hardship, of course, to market staff. You know, having to take extra time away from what we're doing just to, you know, walk to another facility when it's right outside our office. So I just want to let you all know that they're on the case. They're trying to figure it out, and trying to get it done as quickly as possible. But I think that's the only other new news update that I have at the moment. Oh yeah, sorry, one more update, brand new. We have actually hired a market assistant. So traditionally, in a regular year, there's 3 staff people. There's the market manager, there's the assistant market manager / outreach, I can't even say the word, outreach coordinator, and then there's an additional assistant market manager. So how they work in tiers, you know, I would be the only full-time staff, and then Becky is the assistant manager outreach coordinator. So she's basically, you know, second tier part-time. And then the third person would be the third tier, just below Becky, also part-time, but a little bit less hours per week for Becky, so that they, in essence, just work on market days. And we are really excited about this person. They accepted the job just yesterday. So if all things go according to plan, we'll have a very quality person helping. They have a background in sustainable food. They are actually just graduating from the sustainable food program at Yale this weekend. So they're moving back to Michigan. They're from Michigan. They used to attend the market as a child, just as a customer with their parents. So we're very much looking forward to having somebody with a really big food policy background who really cares a lot about farms and sustainable agriculture on our team. So we're looking very forward to that. We had a lot of great candidates, a lot of them well overqualified for this job. But, you know, I think it's just indicative of, you know, people needing to work right now and opportunities being scarce. But that's great. You know, we had 12 applicants, about 3 of them were incredible high quality, and we interviewed 3 people, and this person was our first choice and she accepted. So I'm hoping that she will be starting in the beginning of June. So good news for us. We have been, because Connor, I don't know if we told you, maybe I did. Connor had to leave us because he got a fantastic new job at Cornman Farms as the event coordinator. And we were only borrowing him anyway from another park site as it was, but you know, he just did such a great job at market, and we're looking forward to other folks going to be in the same position as him, doing a great job for us as well. So that's
Thanks for sharing. It's nice to know that the city's supporting the market in that way.
Oh yeah, I mean, the city has been fantastic throughout this. You know, they've been very supportive. They've just been asking me, you know, what do you need, helping us wherever they can. You know, also in terms of the safety stuff, you know, they're not really dictating to us. They're saying, you know, what do you need to feel safe? And they're just kind of backing us up based on that as well. So yes, they've been a great supporter throughout this entire thing. And that's been awesome for me to feel that way as a staff person. So, but I think that is officially the last updates that I have. And I will just put those all under new business.
Pull the agenda back up, Stephanie, please.
Yes, we have moved to, the last thing actually is second public comment or new business. So if anybody has any other items that we didn't talk about, this would be now the time to bring them up. And just 1 second, I'll write this and I'll put back up for you.
Anyone on the line that might want to comment?
Let me see. So if anyone that is attending by phone, if they would like to participate, you can press *9 so that I can see your hand raised and that you can speak if you would like to. All right, I see a hand raised here. All right, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes. Can you unmute yourself? I wish I could do it for you. Oh, there you go.
Yes, this is Bruce Upston, an annual vendor. And one of the things that I see is that in the proposed rule change is that vendors that have stalls, they may be annual vendors, but they may not have stalls that they really prefer. And they don't have the opportunity to take available stalls in order of seniority when they come into market. They have been assigned. Generally, they're assigned in their stall that they have been as their regular stall. And so that is one of my concerns there. That and it seems like there's some people that get moved around completely every time, and I know that that's one of the ways that it happens, but they don't really have the choice of where they get to. Where at least if we had the old system, they would be able to choose what is their best option at the time. And I guess that is probably the main things that I have to say about the proposed rule change.
All right, thank you for your comment. Is there anyone else that is listening in that would like to comment? You can press *9 to raise your hand. All right, well, if there's no other people, oh, I do see a hand raised. I believe it is Carlene. Let's see if this works this time. You can just unmute yourself. If you unmute yourself, we can start. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. And I would say that the other issue with this new process and not having any stages when vendors come in, there are some stalls, and many of them are occupied by permanent vendors that don't have parking or have very little parking, but there's other stalls that do have parking. But if somebody's in there early in the stall with the parking, that's almost impossible for the person to get anywhere close to their stall to unload if they don't get there at like 5 o'clock in the morning or earlier. So I think that adding in a time, and I'm not even saying it has to be 6 or 6:30, whatever time it is, to let them know that if they get there by that time, they'll be able to back up and get unloaded. And it also would give them a target time to get when they need to get out of there, when they need to be unloaded. And that's where the bottlenecks occur. And as we have a fuller market, which we will have, as soon as we don't have spaces between, that'll be even more vehicles trying to get in and out. So that's something to think about as you're deliberating how to improve the sign-in process.
Great.
That's all.
Great. Thank you for your feedback. All right. So there's discussion, commissioners, about those commentaries. I mean, I could respond, but I wanted to hear from you, Helen.
Yeah, I think like there is definitely a trade-off between like for a daily vendor between like having enough time to get set up for market versus having a lot of choice about where you go. And whether people prefer this sign-in or the one where you stand around, like probably depends on that, like what their preference is, how much they like to move around. And I can totally see Carlene's point, especially mentioning like some of the spots that don't have parking with them, but like if you come in to unload and the spots behind your stall are full, like unloading a bunch of stuff from far away changes it completely. So it probably does make sense to have some structure around the timing of arrival. But I don't know how complicated that's going to get with so yeah, I don't know. That's what I thought about that.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I completely can see both sides. Just like what you're saying, Helen, is like that might be great, but then how do we police that? Like, is that something else that we're going to have to write into the rules that like you're going to be penalized if you don't get there at your slotted time? You know, it just seems like that's. I'm not saying we shouldn't look into that. But I'm agreeing that it might make it more complex. And in terms of people, you know, getting bumped out of spots, you know, sometimes things happen where people don't, you know, respond in time, or there's a glitch and the message that they left us didn't get through or something. And there's been some instances in which daily vendors have had to be moved. But part of the reason also those folks were in the spots they were in was because that they had a requirement of parking. So that also reduces drastically the amount of stalls that are even available for folks, even if they do have high seniority on you know, the daily list. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And just in case, you know, you realize or don't realize, is that if there's an open stall or if there's a cancellation, we certainly go by seniority. We certainly offer those to people just like we had before. So that has not gone away. It's just uncommon now because for the most part, people tell us, okay, this is my first choice. If I don't get that, this is my second choice, third choice, fourth choice. So they give us actually incredibly detailed information that might just not be people might just not be aware of because they're not seeing those correspondences with us. But that's something that's going on. But it is true. There has been a few times where people had to be bumped. And sometimes it was extra complicated by their need for parking. When, if they didn't need parking, they would have had more spots available to them to choose. So, but I'm seeing there is another hand up. Let me see. All right, hello, you have 3 minutes. You unmute yourself. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
One of the problems that I see is some of
Sorry, is
the
this Jan?
vendors don't.
You gotta state your name.
I'm
Maybe
sorry. This whole thing is really hard to communicate and to
Okay.
hear these meetings, and it would be
Sure.
a lot easier to do it in public. And I
Sure.
can't deal
you please
with
state
this
your
as
name?
much.
So, can you please state your name before giving your comment, though? It's part of our.
And I really can't hear you.
Can you please state your name for the record?
Okay, I'm Jan Upston.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Go ahead.
Okay, one of the things that I see is that people don't sign in on time. And then they show up on the day of the market without signing in. And you have already assigned somebody their stall, and then you kick those people out of the stall, and you let the vendor have his stall even though he didn't sign in. And I think it should be if they don't sign in by a certain time, they go to the bottom of the list in stall assignments, just like it was from the other way. I've had some vendors that have been assigned stalls every week, but they never get that stall because the vendor whose stall it was show up or don't show up, and there's a lot of confusion, and people are not in the same place that they were assigned. So that's the problem I see, is that if people have to sign in by a certain time, if they don't sign in, then they go to the bottom of the list in stall assignments.
All right, thank you for your comments.
Okay, but
All right, so does anyone have any feedback or want to respond to any of the comments just given? Okay, yeah, I already sort of addressed it, but go ahead, Helen. Yes.
I'm just curious if is that a regular occurrence, or is that something that's happened a few times, or?
It's pretty uncommon, but there have been some issues where, someone left a message, but it didn't go through. It got caught up in our blocked email, or, they signed into the Wednesday sheet when they thought they were signing into the Saturday sheet. So there have been issues that have occurred like that, but I think that's more just, things happen, or somebody has to cancel at the very last moment. Like we had somebody that, we're going to come to market, but then a frost advisory was announced. So then they, stopped. They weren't able to come. So then things got moved around. So that's happened a few times, but, that's pretty normal. And I think the particular person they were referring to is one person. And I think the reason that person got moved was because they needed parking. And, there was very few other spots available. So they just happened to be the unlucky one because they were like first or second or third, very high at the top of the daily list. So they would have had really good spot, you know what I mean? Like their spots would have been more impacted if an annual showed up or not than other people. So, unfortunately, I really do think it's partly like the luck of the draw in some cases, but no, it's not a very common occurrence at all. And if it does happen, it's usually, maybe one person, and we can fix it before people even notice that it's happening. Or it's people that, for example, the last couple weeks, there was somebody that did that thing that like had signed in Wednesday, but didn't realize there was also a Saturday sheet. So I put them on the map when they weren't coming, and they're like, no, I'm not coming. But then I just put the person who likes that spot in there, and they don't even check their email, so they didn't even notice. that things had changed. So I think what I'm hearing a lot is some people, or this could be not correct, but from my perspective, the folks that are the most vocal opponents of the change are the folks that are not personally impacted whatsoever by the sign-in process. And I'm not quite sure why that is. Maybe again, they're just used to it one way and they liked it that way. But I have not heard anything negative from folks that actually would be impacted. I've only heard positive from dailies and also annuals about this. But again, that's not to say we shouldn't get feedback, because we certainly should. I just think that, change is hard, especially something that you're used to doing for generations in some cases. And, I get that. And I know that COVID threw a curveball for a lot of people. But I think in this case that, COVID also actually gave us a solution to this problem, because I don't know if people even knew it was a problem until it was solved. And then they were like, oh my goodness, thank you. Like, please don't ever go back to that other thing. That was horrible for me, or that was stressful, or, people were fighting because of that. Whereas, we don't really have conflicts that I've seen at market that blow up. Whereas I've heard stories of like, oh, so-and-so was yelling over parking. Whereas now, I've had a couple people confused because, on the one side of the market, the parking stall number does not match the stall number. So people are like parking in the wrong spot. And then we have to explain, that the one side doesn't match the other side. And there's some confusion around that. But, these are all issues that we can solve. And I think that, once we all just get on the right page, the same page for that. And again, I wish that the folks that had given the public comment would actually have stayed to hear this answer, because it seems to me that they're not really interested in what we have to say, but more just trying to hear their grievances, which is their right. I just think personally that it is not necessarily a constructive approach. And I would hope that we could have maybe a public forum that people could attend in person soon to discuss these changes before we put anything, back into the rules. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, it sounds like an in-person meeting is pretty critical, given the, discomfort that I think a lot of folks might feel in having a conversation about this, having a sort of dialogue and back and forth on Zoom. Mm-hmm. So hopefully we can do something in person before anything is finalized.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's important, and hopefully, that can happen relatively soon. But in the meantime, I'll certainly write up something that I wanted to share with you, or what we would think that those changes would look like. But again, I have definitely listened to the thing about the timing that people have said. I think that's a really good point that we maybe hadn't thought about before, and definitely taking that into consideration. And I will include that, or include, a question mark, or, to be more discussed point on that when we talk about this again. And I think it would also be helpful to have Stephanie as part of this conversation next month, because she did have experience with the old way and can speak to the challenges the market management face from the other side, right? Not just the vendor side, which is very important, but we're working together on this, and we need to make decisions together. All right, well, there's nothing else on the agenda other than adjournment, unless people have stuff that they wanted to add.
Okay, seeing no additions, I think we need a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks again, Helen.
Thanks.
It's been real.
Thanks, Helen.
See you in
Thanks,
person
guys.
sometime, maybe. But
Yeah.